The conference room on the 47th floor felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Ethan Montgomery stood at the head of the glass table, his jaw tight as he stared at the 7 faces looking back at him. These were supposed to be the best minds money could buy. Each one pulled in 6-figure salaries. Each one had impressive degrees hanging on their office walls. Yet here they sat, 3 weeks into what should have been a straightforward merger, completely stuck. A question without answers. The numbers on the projection screen told a frustrating story. Montgomery Tech Solutions was on the verge of acquiring Horizon Digital, a Swedish software company that would triple their market reach across Europe. Everything had been negotiated, contracts were drafted, press releases sat ready to go. Then the tax lawyers found the clause buried in the International Trade Agreement, one single provision that would cost the company $180 million in penalties if they proceeded as planned. The room full of empty solutions. Robert Hastings, the silver-haired CFO who had been with the company for 12 years, rubbed his temples. His voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had been living at the office. We have explored every legal avenue available to us. The Swedish tax code intersects with American corporate law in ways that create this impossible situation. Unless we can find a legitimate exemption, we're looking at a massive loss before we even complete the acquisition. Frustration boiling over. Victoria Lang, whose sharp suits and sharper mind usually commanded respect, shook her head. There has to be something we are missing. International mergers happen every single day. Someone, somewhere, has faced this exact scenario and found a way through it. Peter Wu leaned back in his chair, the bags under his eyes telling their own story of sleepless nights. We brought in 3 different consulting firms. All of them came back with the same conclusion. The penalty stands unless we restructure the entire deal, which would take another 6 months and cost almost as much as just paying the fine. The CEO's breaking point. Ethan felt his patience finally snap. He had built this company from nothing. At 25, fresh out of business school with more ambition than sense, he had started Montgomery Tech in his apartment. 13 years of grinding, innovating, and fighting had turned that small startup into a billion-dollar enterprise. He had survived market crashes, hostile takeover attempts, and competitors who wanted nothing more than to see him fail. But this ridiculous tax clause was threatening to derail the biggest opportunity of his career. When the brilliant look foolish. His voice came out cold and controlled, which everyone in the room knew meant real anger. So, what you're all telling me is that 7 highly educated, extremely well-compensated professionals cannot solve a problem that boils down to reading tax code? Stephen Blake, who handled acquisitions, shifted uncomfortably. Ethan, with all due respect, this is not about intelligence or effort. The international tax framework is incredibly complex. Sometimes there simply isn't a clean solution. Not good enough. Ethan cut him off. The shareholders are expecting results. The board is breathing down my neck. Horizon Digital is getting nervous about the delays. We have 48 hours before they can legally walk away from this deal and keep the penalty clause active. So unless one of you suddenly has a moment of inspiration, we're about to lose everything we have worked toward for the past year. Silent desperation. Michelle Torres, who managed international relations, spoke up carefully. We could attempt to renegotiate the terms with the Swedish government directly. Perhaps if we explain the situation, they might be willing to grant an exception. Graham Foster, the tax consultant they had brought in at considerable expense, shook his head before she even finished. Government exceptions take months to process, and there's no guarantee they would even consider it. We are beyond that option now. The invisible witness. Nobody in the room noticed when the door opened quietly. Clare Bennett pushed her cart inside, the wheels making barely a whisper on the expensive carpet. She wore the standard uniform of the building's café service, a simple navy polo shirt and black pants that made her blend into the background. For 6 months, she had been coming into this conference room 5 or 6 times every day, serving coffee, collecting empty cups, refilling water pitchers, completely invisible to the people who made million-dollar decisions. A mind that sees everything. But Claire saw them. She heard every word of every meeting. While her hands mechanically performed the tasks of her job, her mind was always working, analyzing, understanding. The executives thought The transformation in the conference room happened in slow motion. 7 pairs of eyes lifted from laptops, tablets, and documents. 7 faces turned toward the woman in the coffee-stained uniform standing by the cart. 7 expressions shifted from intense concentration to complete shock. Claire felt her stomach drop as the weight of what she had just done hit her. Every executive in the room was staring at her like she had suddenly appeared out of thin air, which, in a way, she had. For 6 months, she had been invisible, and now she was the only thing anyone could see. The CEO's piercing gaze. Ethan Montgomery set down the pen he had been gripping so tightly it had left marks on his palm. He took 3 slow steps toward Claire, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, his voice carried a tone she had never heard from him before. Not anger exactly, but something more dangerous. Genuine curiosity mixed with disbelief. "What did you just say?" Claire felt her mouth go dry. Every instinct screamed at her to apologize, to mumble something about speaking out of turn, to retreat back into invisibility where it was safe. But she had already crossed the line. There was no going back now. Standing her ground, she lifted her chin and met his intense stare directly. Article 23D of the 2020 Amendment to the Swedish-American Trade Treaty. It was implemented specifically to encourage technology sector partnerships between the two countries. The amendment created exemptions for mergers that could demonstrate 3 key factors. First, proven innovation value that advances the technology sector. Second, documented commitment to retaining at least 75% of the combined workforce for a minimum of 3 years. Third, maintaining primary operational headquarters on United States soil. Claire paused, watching the information sink in. Montgomery Tech has filed 6 major patents in the past 18 months. Your workforce retention rate is already above 80%. Your headquarters has been in Seattle since the company was founded. You meet every single requirement for the exemption. The tax penalty everyone is worried about does not apply to your situation at all. You have been using outdated treaty provisions as your reference point for 3 entire weeks. Disbelief and defense. Robert Hastings was the first to recover his voice, and it came out dripping with condescension that made Claire's blood boil. And where exactly does someone who serves coffee obtain this kind of specialized knowledge? Did you take an online course between refilling sugar dispensers? But Ethan was already moving. He strode back to his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard with urgent purpose. Around the table, the other executives scrambled to do the same. Victoria grabbed her tablet. Peter unlocked his phone. Stephen pulled up multiple browser windows. Michelle's fingers danced across her computer keys. Even Graham, the expensive consultant, was frantically searching through digital files. The silence shifted from shocked to frantic. Claire stood by her coffee cart, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Part of her still could not believe she had actually spoken up. The other part was terrified she had somehow gotten the information wrong, that she was about to be humiliated in front of everyone. Then Michelle gasped, her face illuminated by the glow of her screen. She exists. The article exists. Amendment 23D, implemented in March 2020, special provisions for technology sector mergers between American and Scandinavian companies. Peter's voice came out strangled as he read from his phone. Innovation value demonstrated through patent filings, workforce retention commitments, headquarters location requirements. We meet every single criteria listed here. Victoria looked up from her tablet, her face pale. The exemption is complete. No penalties, no restructuring required. The merger can proceed exactly as originally planned. Stephen turned to Graham, his expression somewhere between amazement and fury. How did 3 consulting firms miss this? How did all of us miss this? Graham's hands were shaking slightly as he scrolled through documents on his laptop. The 2020 amendment was implemented right as the pandemic hit. A lot of international trade law changes got buried in the chaos of that period. Most firms were still referencing pre-pandemic frameworks because that was what they knew. His voice trailed off as the excuse fell flat even to his own ears. Ethan slowly straightened up from his laptop. He turned to look at Claire with an expression he could not quite read. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. She is absolutely correct. Article 23D provides complete exemption from the penalty structure. Montgomery Tech qualifies under every provision. The merger can proceed without any financial penalties whatsoever. Julia Reed, who had been silent until now, spoke up with genuine confusion in her voice. How did you know this? Claire felt 6 months of frustration bubble up inside her. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. I have a degree in international economics from Portland State University. I graduated with highest honors. I wrote my senior thesis on post-pandemic changes to international trade agreements and how they affected corporate mergers in the technology sector. Article 23D was one of the primary case studies in my research. I applied for a position in your corporate strategy department 8 months ago and never even got an interview. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Claire saw the flicker of recognition in several faces. Someone in this room probably saw her application and dismissed it without a second thought. Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably. Then why are you working in the café? Because my father died and left my family buried in medical debt. Because my mother needs medication that costs $300 a month. Because my brother is in college and someone has to help pay his tuition. Because the strategy position required 6 months as an unpaid intern first, and I needed money immediately, not eventually. The weight of reality. Claire's voice did not waver even though her hands were trembling. So, I took the job that paid $12 an hour and offered health insurance. I came into this room every single day for 6 months. I listened to every meeting. I saw every problem you were trying to solve. And I stayed quiet because that is what people like me are supposed to do. We stay invisible. We do. The elevator climbed steadily toward the 47th floor, each second feeling like an eternity. Claire watched the numbers light up one by one, her mind racing through 1,000 possible scenarios. What did Ethan Montgomery want to say to her? Was this where he politely asked her to sign a non-disclosure agreement and never speak of this again? Was he going to offer her some small bonus and expect her to be grateful? Or worse, was this where he explained why speaking out of turn was inappropriate, regardless of whether she had been right? The elevator chimed softly and the doors slid open. A world apart. The 47th floor was nothing like the basement where Claire spent her days. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of Seattle's skyline. The carpet was thick and silent under her feet. Original artwork lined the walls, pieces that probably cost more than Claire would earn in 5 years. Everything spoke of wealth, power, and success. She felt acutely aware of the coffee stain on her uniform, the scuff marks on her shoes, the fact that she clearly did not belong in this rarefied space. But she had come this far. She was not turning back now. The executive suite. Office 4701 sat at the end of a long hallway. The door was solid oak with a brass nameplate that read simply, Ethan Montgomery, Chief Executive Officer, in elegant lettering. Claire raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. Through the frosted glass panel beside the door, she could see movement inside. Multiple people. Her stomach dropped. This was not going to be a private conversation. She was walking into another room full of executives, probably to be lectured about proper workplace behavior. Claire almost turned around right then, almost retreated back to the elevator in the safety of invisibility. The moment of truth. But then she remembered the look on Victoria's face when the coffee spilled, the complete lack of acknowledgement, as if Claire was not even worth a simple apology. She remembered 3 weeks of watching brilliant people fail at something she could have solved on day one if anyone had thought to ask. She remembered 8 months ago sending in a carefully crafted application and never even receiving the courtesy of a rejection letter. Claire knocked firmly on the door. "Come in." Ethan's voice carried clearly through the wood. She opened the door and stepped inside, her chin up, her shoulders back, ready for whatever came next. Not what she expected. The office was enormous, probably larger than Claire's apartment, but what stopped her in her tracks was not the size or the expensive furnishings. It was the people. All 7 executives from the conference room were there, standing in a loose semicircle, but their body language was different now. Robert Hastings looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Victoria Lang would not meet Claire's eyes. Peter Wu kept adjusting his tie nervously. The confident, powerful executives from an hour ago suddenly looked like students called to the principal's office. A different kind of meeting. Ethan stood behind his massive desk, his expression serious but not angry. He gestured to a leather chair positioned in front of the desk. "Please, sit down." Claire remained standing. "I would rather not. I have somewhere I need to be." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "This will not take long, but it is important. Please." There was something in his tone, a genuine quality that made Claire reconsider. She walked over and sat down, perching on the edge of the chair, ready to leave at a moment's notice. Ethan came around the desk and leaned against it, putting himself at eye level with her rather than looming from behind the massive piece of furniture. The apology she never expected. "Before we discuss anything else, I need to say something." Ethan looked directly at Claire, his blue eyes intense but not intimidating. "You were right about everything. Not just about the tax treaty, though that alone was remarkable. You were right about being invisible, about being ignored, about having knowledge and skills that nobody here bothered to notice or value. That was wrong. It was inexcusable, and I apologize." Claire blinked, caught completely off guard. Of all the things she had expected, a genuine apology from a billionaire CEO was not on the list. She glanced at the executives standing behind her. Several of them looked deeply uncomfortable. Collective accountability. Robert stepped forward, his voice rough. "I owe you an apology as well. My comment about online courses was dismissive and disrespectful. You demonstrated expertise that I failed to recognize, and I responded with condescension rather than curiosity. That says more about my failings than yours." Victoria spoke next, finally meeting Claire's eyes. "I spilled coffee on you and did not even acknowledge it. I treated you like you were not there, like you didn't matter. That was inexcusable. I am sorry." One by one, each executive offered their own apology. Some were more genuine than others, but the fact that they were happening at all left Claire momentarily speechless. The real question. When the last apology had been spoken, Ethan straightened up. "Now I have a question for you, and I need you to be completely honest. Why did you speak up today? You said you have been coming into that conference room for 6 months, listening to meetings, staying quiet. What changed? Why today?" Claire considered lying, offering some noble reason about wanting to help or doing the right thing. But she was done hiding parts of herself to make other people comfortable. She met Ethan's gaze directly. "Victoria spilled hot coffee on me and couldn't be bothered to say she was sorry. That was the moment I realized I was done being invisible." The truth of invisibility. She continued, her voice gaining strength. "For 6 months, I have watched all of you struggle with problems I could solve. I listened to meetings where you discussed concepts I studied in university. I served coffee to people having conversations about my actual field of expertise. And I stayed quiet because that's what people in my position are supposed to do. We are supposed to know our place, stay in our lane, be grateful for whatever scraps we get. But today, watching you all fail for 3 weeks at something that took me 30 seconds to identify while being treated like